My name is Darren Gerdes, and this is a daily brief. 810 Russians are now off the battlefield, and if you do the math, that's 11,250 short of 400,000 killed or wounded Russians. That means in about 2 weeks, 14 days and change, at the rate that they're going, there'll be 400,000 Russian casualties. That's a week before 2 years. 400,000 Russian casualties. Another 2 air defense systems were delivered to Ukraine, according to Zelensky. 2 more air defense systems. He said that these systems can down anything or everything, and they will be used for the protection of regions. In the meantime, Ukrainians have made realistic decoys, and I've talked about this before, but the realistic decoys that the Russians have taken shots at, and they might even have taken a shot at something along these lines. They said that the video of an MPQ-64 shows the system actually mechanically functioning with moving parts, an impressive feature that helps sell it as a real radar. And the Irish T-SLM has a realistic looking launcher able to lift up into position, giving the appearance of a legitimate air defense system. So good, if they can trick them into using a missile on something like that, that's a cost-effective solution. Meanwhile, they're coming up with other interesting solutions. Enemy Tu-95 bomber pilot shot inside Russia. Well, that's one way. The Tu-95 bomber pilot has been shot inside the Russian city of Engels, according to Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate, the GRU. The commander of the crew of the Tu-95 strategic bomber, Major Oleg, I can't pronounce his name, was shot. He's directly involved in launching missile strikes on civilian objects in Ukraine and killing our people. Okay, well, it's yet to be determined whether he lived or died. Nevertheless, that's another way of working through the problem that they have of keeping these planes from destroying Ukrainians. Meanwhile, Sersky is visiting defense units in the Kupiansk Axis. Now, that's what good military leaders do, and here's what good political leaders do. The Czech Republic is urging EU states to buy up 500,000 shells for Ukraine beyond the bloc. Now, I talked about the ammunition hunger that they have. The EU promised 1 million artillery shells, and so far they've only delivered about 300,000 and change, and by March they might have 500,000. So the Czech Republic says that it's high time to look beyond the borders of the EU for supplies. Frustrated by the shortfall, Prague is pushing EU countries to finance the purchase of what it estimates as 450,000 rounds of artillery available outside the bloc. Well, what is all this talk about the bloc? Well, in early 2023, France, the bloc's defense industry leader, had been pushing to make sure that subsidies were focused only on local production. So the reason for the shortfall is because they can't actually produce it. Well, they can, but they haven't had the will to produce it within the EU, and they were only going to produce it within the EU, and now as a consequence, Ukraine is suffering. Of course, we have our own problems in the United States, and I'm not sure who to be more upset with right now between Mike Johnson and Tucker Carlson, but we'll save that for a later video. Thank you for your time and the likes and the shares and the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.